Lindsay was in the doorway, hovering as she'd done on the day Lennon and the uniformed officer had bought my hat with a jingle bell, the twin of which she owned. That day she had quietly shoved the second hat into a box of old dolls in the back of her closet. She never wanted my mother to hear the sound of those bead-like bells again. There was our father. The heart we knew held all of us, held us heavily and desperately, the doors of his heart opening and closing with the rapidity of stops on an instrument, the quiet, felt closures, the ghostly fingering, practice, and then, incredibly, sound and melody and warmth. Lindsay stepped forward from her place by the door. "Hello again, Lindsay," Len said. "Detective Veneman." "I was just telling your father that you're giving up. If there's any good reason to suspect the man, are you done?" Lindsay asked. She was suddenly the wife to our father, as well as the oldest, most responsible child. "I just want you all to know that we've investigated every lead." My father and Lindsay heard her, and I saw her. My mother coming down the stairs. Buckley raced out of the kitchen and charged, propelling his full weight into my father's legs. "Len," my mother said, pulling her terry cloth robe tighter when she saw him, "has Jack offered you coffee?" My father looked at his wife and then Veneman. "The cops are punting," Lindsay said, taking Buckley gently by the shoulders and holding him against her. "Punting?" Buckley asked. He always rolled a sound around in his mouth like a sour ball until he had its taste and feel. "What?" "Detective Veneman is here to tell Dad to stop bugging them." "Lindsay," Len said, "I wouldn't put it like that." "Whatever," she said. My sister wanted out, now, into a place where gifted camp continued, where Samuel and she, or even Archie, who at the last minute had won the perfect murder competition by entering the icicle as murder weapon idea, ruled her world. "Come on, Dad," she said. My father was slowly fitting something together. It was nothing to do with George Harvey, nothing to do with me. It was in my mother's eyes. That night, as he had more and more often, my father stayed up by himself in his study. He could not believe the world falling down around him, how unexpected it all was after the initial blast of my death. "I feel like I'm standing in the wake of a volcano eruption," he wrote in his notebook. "Abigail thinks Len Veneman is right about Harvey." As he wrote, the candle in the window kept flickering, and despite his desk lamp, the flickering distracted him. He sat back in the old wooden school chair he'd had since college, and heard the reassuring squeak of the wood under him. At the firm, he was failing to even register what was needed of him. Daily now he faced column after column of meaningless numbers he was supposed to make square with company claims. He was making mistakes with a frequency that was frightening, and he feared, more than he had in the first days following my disappearance, that he would not be able to support his 2 remaining children. He stood up and stretched his arms overhead, trying to concentrate on the few exercises that our family doctor had suggested. I watched his body bend in uneasy and surprising ways I had never seen before. He could have been a dancer rather than a businessman. He could have danced on Broadway with Rana Singh. He snapped off the desk light, leaving only the candle. In his low green easy chair, he now felt the most comfortable. It was where I often saw him sleep. The room like a vault, the chair like a womb, and me standing guard over him. He stared at the candle in the window and thought about what to do, how he had tried to touch my mother and she pulled away over to the edge of the bed, but how in the presence of the police she seemed to bloom. He had grown used to the ghostly light behind the candle's flame, that quivering reflection in the window. He stared at the 2 of them, real flame and ghost, and began to work toward a doze, dozing in thought and strain at the events of the day. As he was about to let go for the night, we both saw the same thing. Another light. Outside. It looked like a penlight from that distance. One white beam slowly moving out across the lawns and toward the junior high. My father watched it. It was after midnight now, and the moon was not full enough, as it often was, to see the outlines of the trees and the houses. Mr. Steed, who rode his bike late at night with a flashing light on the front powered by his pedals, would never degrade the lawns of his neighbours that way. It was too late for Mr. Steed anyway. My father leaned forward in the green chair in his study and watched the flashlight move in the direction of the fallow cornfield. "Bastard," he whispered. "You murderous bastard." He dressed quickly from the storage closet in his study, putting on a hunting jacket that he hadn't had on since an ill-fated hunting trip 10 years earlier. Downstairs he went into the front hall closet and found the baseball bat he bought for Lindsay before she favoured soccer. First he shut off the porch light they kept on all night for me, and that, even though it had been 8 months since the police said I would not be found alive, they could not bring themselves to stop leaving on. With his hand on the doorknob, he took a deep breath. He turned the knob and found himself out on the dark front porch. He closed the door and found himself standing in his front yard with a baseball bat and these words, "Find a quiet way." He walked toward his front yard and across the street and then into the O'Dwyer's yard where he had first seen the light. He passed their darkened swimming pool and the rusted-out swing set. His heart was pumping, but he could not feel anything but the knowledge in his brain. George Harvey had killed his last little girl. He reached the soccer field. To his right, far into the cornfield, but not into the vicinity he knew by heart, the area that had been roped off and cleared and combed and bulldozed, he saw the small light. He clenched his fingers tighter around the bat by his side. For just a second he could not believe what he was about to do, but then, with everything in him, he knew. The wind helped him. It swept along the soccer field alongside the cornfield and whipped his trousers around the front of his legs. It pushed him forward despite himself. Everything fell away. Once he was among the rows of corn, his focus solely on the light, the wind disguised his presence. The sound of his feet crushing the stalks was swept up in the whistle and bustle of the wind against the broken plants. Things that made no sense flooded his head, the hard rubber sound of children's roller skates on pavement, the smell of his father's pipe tobacco, Abigail's smile when he met her, like light piercing his confused heart. And then the flashlight shut off and everything went equal and dark. He took a few more steps, then stopped. "I know you're here," he said. "I flooded the cornfield. I flashed fires through it to light it up. I sent storms of hail and flowers, but none of it worked to warn him. I was relegated to heaven, and I watched." "I'm here for it," my father said, his voice trembling. That heart bursting in and out, blood gorging the rivers of his chest and then cinching up. Breath and fire and lungs seizing, releasing, adrenaline saving what was left. My mother's smile in his mind gone, mine taking its place. "Nobody's wake," my father said. "I'm here to finish it." He heard whimpering. I wanted to cast down a spotlight like they did in the school auditorium, awkwardly, the light not always hitting the right place on the stage. There she would be, crouching and whimpering, and now, despite her blue eyeshadow and Western-style boots from Baker's, wetting her pants, a child. She did not recognize my father's voice infused with hate. "Brian?" Clarissa's quavering voice came out. "Brian?" It was hope like a shield. My father's hand loosened on the bat, letting it fall. "Hello? Who's there?" With wind in his ears, Brian Nelson, the beanstalk scarecrow, parked his older brother's Spider Corvette in the school lot. Late, always late, sleeping in class and at the dinner table, but never when a boy had a playboy or a cute girl walked by. Never on a night when he had a girl waiting for him out in the cornfield. Still, he took his time. The wind, glorious blanket and cover for what he had planned, whipped past his ears. Brian moved toward the cornfield with his giant torchlight from his mother's under-the-sink disaster kit. When he finally heard what he would later say were Clarissa's cries for help. My father's heart was like a stone there, heavy, carried inside his chest as he ran and fumbled toward the sound of the girl's whimpering. His mother was knitting him mittens. Susie was asking for gloves, so cold in the cornfield in winter. Clarissa, Susie's silly friend, makeup, pretty jam sandwiches, and her tropical tan skin. He ran blind into her and knocked her down in the darkness. Her screaming filled his ear and poured into the empty spaces, ricocheting inside him. "Susie!" he screamed back. Brian ran when he heard my name, full speed ahead, awake. His light hopped over the cornfield and, for one bright second, there was Mr. Harvey. No one but me saw him. Brian's light hit his back as he crawled into the high stalks and listened, again, for the sound of whimpering. And then the light hit target, and Brian dragged my father up and off Clarissa to hit him on the head and back and face with the survival kit flashlight. My father shouted and yelped and moaned, and then Brian saw the bat. I pushed and pushed against the unyielding borders of my heaven. I wanted to reach out and lift my father up, away, to me. Clarissa ran and Brian swung. My father's eyes caught Brian's, but he could barely breathe. "You fucker!" Brian was black and white with blame. I heard mumblings in the dirt. I heard my name. I thought I could taste the blood on my father's face, reach out to draw my fingers across his cut lips, lie down with him in my grave. But I had to turn my back in heaven. I could do nothing, trapped in my perfect world. The blood I tasted was bitter, acid. I wanted my father's vigil, his tight love for me, but also I wanted him to go away and leave me be. I was granted 1 week grace. Back in the room, where the green chair was still warm from his body, I blew that lonely, flickering candle out.